Hello, and welcome to the recording of the Trainer Standards webinar that was delivered on February 16th. This webinar jumpstarts the public comment period on the revised Trainer Standards draft. Work on the revision of the Trainer Standards was started last spring and continued through 2020 as it's still in the works today. We have made a really strong effort over these months to engage the individuals who will be most impacted by the standard to shape its direction. And the draft that is available for public comment now is the result of an iterative and collaborative process of a large number of stakeholders who represent a variety of perspectives. We're really glad that you're here to learn about the work that we have done, and we hope that you will continue to provide your own feedback in the development of the final draft. Thanks for joining us today. We will start by building the context and explaining the revision. And this will help us make sure that everyone who's interested in participating in this process has the information that they need to understand the key drivers behind our decision-making process, who was involved in the revision, and establish an understanding of the research that we were using to inform our work. We will also talk about how we envision operationalizing or putting into practice the standards. And then we'll move into a high-level review of the standards, their competencies, and the way that the standards are organized. We will not go into detail of each of the competencies and their indicators here, because that would be difficult to cover in an engaging way in a webinar. Instead, our goal is to help explain the organization of the trainer standards so that you can review the document on your own time and understand how to use it. Finally, we'll share a way how you can provide us with feedback, the type of feedback that we're looking for, and the ways that you can submit it to our team. So let's dive right in. We know that there are a variety of learning approaches available. We know that our professional development system is comprised of higher education, it has training as part of it, it has relationship-based professional development as another part of it. And the research that was done by the Institute of Medicine and the National Research Council in 2015, already a little while ago. It was very seminal work, but their body of their text, Transforming the Workforce, identified some of the key features of impactful learning. And we know those to be clear intention and purpose, having training and professional learning that's grounded in the science of child development, early learning and administration. We also know that in order to have impactful learning, the person that's delivering the learning must understand how adults learn. And then part of that is also making sure that the topics that they bring up, the materials that they provide, the activities that they engage participants in allow those learners to apply the concepts that they're learning to real life situations. Another key feature of impactful learning is making sure that whatever training content is being delivered is aligned with core competencies and established standards. And when we talk about core competencies and established standards here, we're talking about what we know to be the critical knowledge, skills, and abilities of early learning educators and those professionals who work with school-age children. And the reason this is because we want to make sure whatever is being delivered is grounded in science of child development. So there's another key feature that's at play, is that making sure that professional learning opportunities that are given to licensed childcare providers have processes for accountability for meeting quality expectations. Many of you know that the State Approved Training Program has some quality expectations and has some processes in place for accountability, like the random annual trainer observer checks. And then there's some processes of accountability for organizations that are contracted by DCYF to provide professional learning. And of course, this has been part of conversations for many, many years now, but making sure that the people who are seeking learning have equitable access to learning. And that means making sure that trainings are affordable, that they're available in the native language of the provider, and that despite where that provider might be located, they're able to get to training. So the trainer standards capture the knowledge, skills, and abilities that are necessary for trainers to have an impact on their participants. You'll see that some of the key features from the last slide show up through the document that you're going to take a look at. But we also want to acknowledge that individual dispositions and characteristics also play a really big role in the way that participants receive the content. We don't necessarily call out these dispositions and characteristics in our standards explicitly, but you will see some of them embedded throughout the document. And we don't want to lose the fact that that trainer's individuality can also change the direction of or the impact of how the learner receives the content. So we know that knowledge and skills and abilities lead to impact, but we also know that individual dispositions and characteristics also influence the impact of a learning experience. So we know that the word standards can be a loaded term. It may raise questions like, who was part of establishing the expectations? Are they going to be representative of the different trainer styles that are out there? And maybe, am I going to see myself reflected in the trainer standards? And all of these are very real and legitimate questions. And the work group that we had working on the revision was heavily invested in the process and held these questions at the center of our discussions. We grappled with them at every meeting, and we hope that the document will allow trainers to bring their own flavor and style while still having a set expectations and meeting the quality that we want for our state-approved trainer program. And this is where your feedback would be helpful. We want to make sure that this document can serve the broad range of trainers that is out there. There's also value in having trainer standards for our program. First, they offer a unified understanding of what it means to be an effective trainer. And the goal is for trainers to help their participants to make shifts in mindset and practice. We would like all trainers who come into our system, regardless of how long they've been training or what state they might be coming from or might have gotten their start in, to understand what our Washington State Approved Trainer Program expectations are. Ultimately, this is really for the benefit of the licensed child care professionals and the children and families that are in their care. Trainers have a responsibility to provide high quality learning opportunities. And the standards also allow us to have shared language about training and trainers. This really comes into play when we are explaining our training program to funders, policymakers, or representing our program to colleagues who are out of our state. And since trainer standards capture essential knowledge, skills, and abilities that lead to impact, they can be used by trainers and trainer mentors or supervisors to support individual practice and growth. And because we have written expectations about the knowledge, skills, and abilities for trainers, we'll be able to inform the development of learning supports that will be relevant to all state-approved trainers in our program. So you may be thinking, well, why are you deciding to complete the revision now? There's a lot of other work that you could be doing. Well, that's true. And this has been on our minds since the revision of the RBPD, the Relationship-Based Professional Development Standards, in 2019. Those standards had some overlap and parallels with the trainer competencies that were in place. And we wanted to make sure that there was alignment between the two documents. The original trainer competencies were put into place about 10 years ago, and it's naturally time to revise them. We've learned a lot more about adult learning and working with diverse communities since then. Plus, the arrival of COVID-19 and this focus on racial equity by DCYF and society at large has created a window of opportunity to create a more robust standard on racial equity and social justice, and make sure that we have competencies in place that provide guidance on how to train in a mostly virtual world. We realized that the original trainer competencies did not really address how to provide virtual training, which is a huge gap for our current needs right now. You may also notice, if you're familiar with the relationship-based professional development standards, that the formats of the two documents are very similar. And that was very intentional. We're striving to create a consistent look and feel to our materials, so that there's less of a learning curve for navigating the tools that guide our work. If you worked with the original trainer competencies, you will notice that we worked hard to address the repetition that was present in the original document. Our goal overall has been to make a more usable and user-friendly resource for our trainer workforce. Okay, so now that you know a little bit more about our thinking behind the revision, you may also want to know about how the trainer standards will be implemented. I'm sure this is on all of your minds. As with the trainer competencies that were originally in place, the trainer standards will be used during trainer observations. So for example, they can be used during observation by mentors for professional development or during those random quality assurance checks that I mentioned earlier, the ones that are conducted by DCYF contracted trainer observers or organization trainer mentors. And the trainer standards will be used to update trainer observation rubrics, and they will be used to inform professional growth plans. Finally, there's an expectation that trainers participate in annual in-service hours. We haven't really enforced that in the past, but we're moving in a direction for more accountability in the future. So one of the things that we would really like to see is the trainers use the standards to guide their professional learning. And in addition, some of the standards, for example, and very specifically, the standard on the anti-bias and anti-racism will be embedded into the annual in-service requirement. This is a policy shift that we are exploring, and it's not in practice right now. So we began our community engagement process this summer with webinars, survey, and focus groups. And we asked questions that would help us understand what kind of knowledge, skills, and abilities are valued by trainers, providers who participate in the training, and training program administrators and policymakers. So then after we did that, we engaged a work group that comprised of organizations that offered training to the community for both early learning and school-age professionals. There were independent trainers, higher education representatives, trainer observers that we presented as well. And this group met 6 times to revise the original trainer competencies, reflect on the trainer standards that were in place across the country, and grapple with how to create a dynamic set of standards. There was also a subgroup that broke off from the main group to did parallel work on creating that anti-bias and anti-racist standard, because that was a really intense body of work to grapple with, to deal with. And they were members of the original trainer revisions work group, but they took a leadership role and did additional work around that standard. So that was the process that we had in place. And then the work group created and generated the language, generated recommendations. DCYF took those recommendations back and the language that was put together and formatted it. And that's where we are with the public comment draft now. And the goal right now is to make sure that we have a cycle of feedback where you all can then take a look at what was developed and let us know if we're on the right track with our revision. So we're going to switch gears now, and we're going to talk about the different standards that we identified. So we have 5 standards that were identified as critical elements of impact. The first one being anti-bias and anti-racist approaches, the learning environment, preparing and delivering content, facilitation, and evaluation and assessment. So these are the 5 standards. And if you go through the draft, you'll see that there are parallels to the original trainer competencies that were developed, but there are differences and additions as well. Each of the standards is comprised of competencies, and each of the competencies breaks down even further into indicators. It didn't capture how they're broken down into indicators here because there's a lot of indicators that go with the different competencies. Along the top row, you will see the standard names, and below it, they branch into the different competencies that make up that particular standard. So for the first one on anti-bias and anti-racist approach, that one is comprised of 2 competencies, one on the awareness of self, and one that's called Practices That Advance Equity, Diversity, Inclusion. Actually, that title has since Tuesday changed on advice of our DCYF Racial Equity and Social Justice Division. to rename it to practices that advance racial equity and social justice. The learning environment has three competencies. It has relational learning environment, physical learning environment, virtual learning environment. And the virtual learning environment section is brand new, and that is really unique to this revision. In preparing and developing, that's all for trainers who build out their content. We incorporate a couple of different elements into this one that didn't come up in the original trainer competencies. And there are elements around universal design for learning, which shows up throughout the document, but also very heavily in engaging all participants, and in the learning content section and the virtual design section, which is also unique to this revision. Then there's a facilitating standard, which was also part of the original trainer competencies. It talks about adult learning principles and the supporting adult learners competency, and also provides competencies or indicators around how to facilitate a training. And finally, and this is very important, evaluation and assessment. We talk about how to evaluate learning during the training, and then we also talk about how to evaluate whether the learning objectives for that training session were accomplished. Okay, so in this slide, I'm going to share with you how the standard is organized in the document. And this is, you can pause me here and remind me if you need to go through it again. What you're looking at is standard 1. Well, actually, it's no longer standard 1. This is an old visual that I am sorry I haven't revised. I didn't catch that beforehand. So this is a standard on learning environment. On top, you will see the standard name. That's the name that is in purple. And then you will see below it the competency name. And we know that there was a competency, there were several competencies under learning environment, and this is just one of them. It's the first one. Under that competency name, there's a description paragraph, and that paragraph really strives to capture the intent of that competency. If you look below, it says indicators. Now, these are very concrete statements that describe the knowledge, skills, and abilities that we envision for the learner to master. I'm losing my words, but the indicators really show the knowledge, skills, and abilities that we want to see all trainers develop and grow over the course of their career or role as a trainer. So the levels that you see, and we've actually had a work group meeting very recently, yesterday, where we talked about changing the level names to something that shows instead of numbers, but in words, the progression of skills from level 1 to 2 and 3. We look at 1, and level 1 is the emerging skills. And then number 2 is where a trainer has mastered or learned or demonstrated the skills and knowledge in level 1, the emerging, where they're really new. They have mastered or achieved some of them, and now they're in the second level, which is more of the establishing further and deepening further some of their knowledge and skills. And 3 is for trainers who have really been doing the work for a while and have a deep understanding of how to meet that competency. So in the document that you will see, there is going to be words instead of numbers for level, because we have different levels in our core competencies and that are used for trainer approval. And we decided that it was going to confuse people if we had numbers. And then at the end of each competency, you will see examples in practice, and they're broken up by the different levels for emerging skills. So that's where we really wanted to show in practice what it would look like if a trainer was meeting indicators that are in the emerging skills column, or what it would be like to meet skills in the middle column. This is a very similar to the RBPD standards, the relationship-based professional development standards. We really want to see this, a person who's looking at this, read the indicators as they're not aligned. So 1A and 2A and 3A are not the same idea across the board. They're not threaded that way. We're looking at the columns holistically. So newer trainers are probably going to be in the left column more so, but they might have skills in the middle column or the column on the right. So there's some fluidity, and we know that trainers come to their roles with different levels of experience, and they're going to be in different places. So some of you might be familiar with the RS scales, where you need to meet all indicators in like column 1 to move to be considered for column 3. That's not how this is going to work. We really believe that people will see their skills showing up in different places. So this is a format that is held consistently throughout the document. Now is really our turn to say our greatest resources are the people who are already doing the work. The work group was full of really superstar leaders and people who were very knowledgeable and passionate about professional learning. They were a fantastic group of people, but we really want to make sure that this is going to be a document that will work for the diverse trainer workforce. And your voice really, truly matters. So we're asking you and giving you an opportunity to step up and help us shape this guiding document for trainers, because you will see the trainer standards show up over and over again in all training related matters and trainer related matters in the future. So this is an opportunity, and it's the final opportunity for you all to see, tell us if we're headed in the right direction. So what you're going to see on the screen is the SurveyMonkey link. We have a survey that is open until March 5th, although we are probably going to extend that out a little bit further. And I'll provide you with more information on our website and in the Gov delivery message that I'll send out to all trainers. I want to make sure we reach as many people as possible. And I know there's going to be some people in our workforce who have limited English abilities. So we know that we have some Somali speaking trainers and some Spanish speaking trainers out there, and we're working really hard to create opportunities to engage those trainers in providing feedback on this document as well. So because of that and the complexities involved in making that happen, it's likely that this public comment period will extend a little bit further than what we originally planned for. My goal is to give more time for that work to happen and for us to receive that feedback. So when you go to the SurveyMonkey link, it will open up the survey, and inside the survey, you will see another link that will take you to the actual trainer standards draft. And you can look at that document. It'll be a Word document. So you have several options. You can either fill out the survey, or you can also fill out this, use the actual Word documents to annotate, write comments, cross things out, really work with the text if you want that opportunity to go deeper. Or you can do both. You can do the survey and provide that deep feedback inside the actual document. We leave that up to you because we know that different people have different levels of engagement that they're interested in, and also they have different constraints on their time that might limit the way that they can participate in. So you have some options there. And if you have any questions at all, please reach out to the training inbox, which is training@dcyf.wa.gov, and we'll get back to you and as soon as possible and answer your questions. You can also send, if you annotate inside the Word document itself, you can send that document to training@dcyf.wa.gov as well. And I am always available for questions. I didn't introduce myself in the beginning. This is Vasilia Mindabayeva. You can always reach out to me as well. I monitor the training inbox, so you can direct questions to me if you don't have my personal email address quite yet. So thank you so much. We really count on you to make sure that what we put out will be usable and will serve the state-approved trainers that are in our workforce. All right, everybody. Thank you so much for listening. We really appreciate you and the work that you do.